If you want to get better as a player, get better overall, have a way better understanding of the game, the most basic aspect you're going to have to learn is your frame data. And yesterday I got this bundle for the Street Fighter 2 OSTs, and the Vega theme is kind of hard, man. I'm not gonna lie. Now, I remember when I was playing 5, I didn't understand anything. I was just, pressing buttons just to press buttons. I didn't understand what frame data was. So because of that, I was just like confused and floating. And then I eventually ended up dropping the game because I was like, what is this? Frame data, I don't understand anything. That's why this video exists. So you can understand how frame data works. Because you have a basic understanding of how it works, you'll basically be able to understand the whole game. Dropping the game because I didn't understand frame data. At the time, I didn't even know that's what it was. You get into a fighting game, you just want to press buttons, win games, but it's not that easy. It takes a little bit of strategy, you gotta think a little bit. So I want you to have a way better time starting out in fighting games than I did. So with that, we're gonna start off with what is a frame. Now, you know how like when you're playing a game, some games run at 60 FPS, 200 FPS, some PCs can go like 360 FPS, frames per second. That's pretty much how a frame works in this game. A frame is 1/60th of a second. So 60 FPS, you have 60 frames per second. So this game goes 60 frames. Now that's not like concrete. You'll have like frames that are like screen freezes and things like that. Just know pretty much 60 FPS. The majority of moves, 1/60th of a second is one frame. There's a couple different types of frames in this game, but pretty much there's 4 groupings, and those groupings are counter frames, active frames, invincibility frames, and recovery frames. And your recovery frames are pretty much the same as your counter frames, but a little bit different. If you want to see all the different types of frames and it being explained, I'll put a little pop-up right here, but it's under the frame meter and U tab, and you can see that in the training room. So with that being said, we're gonna have to take a little break from the frames part, because in order to understand frames, you need to understand how moves work. So we gotta cook a little bit with how the moves work, and then you'll be able to understand how frames work. So the majority of the moves in this game have 3 sections: startup, active frames, and then we have recovery frames. And for this example, we're gonna use Chun's forward medium punch. This move has a 7 frame startup. So you see right here, all these frames, we have 6 frames. And then the first active frame or red frame, that is the 7 frame. That's when the move actually is hitting. The attack is attacking. Instead of saying the move has a 6 frame startup, has a 7 frame startup, because we include that first active frame in the startup. So whenever you hear someone say a move has a 4 frame startup, it's gonna have 3 counter frames, and then they're gonna include the first active frame. So that's how you classify startup. Now, what does this startup mean? It is a counter state. When you press your button, so when I press forward medium punch, I have to wait 6 frames, and then on that 7th frame, the move will begin. Now, the reason why these startup frames are also called counter frames is because if you get hit within this window, your opponent will hit you with a counter hit. You'll see counter on the screen. You basically got hit before your move came out or started. Now, this particular move has 3 active frames. That basically means 3 of those frames, your attack is attacking, your hit is hitting. This is when you're going to see your move either hit. If your opponent's blocking, you'll see the block animation. And during your active frame, whatever active frame hits or lands on your opponent, that's when your opponent will receive either a hit stun or a block stun state, and it shows in the frame data. Now, after your active frames are finished, your move will then go into a recovery state. Now, this recovery state is where I would say things can get a little bit confusing and muddy. I'm gonna explain it the best I can, so hopefully you're able to understand how this recovery state works. So we're going to stick with the same move, Chun's forward medium punch. Now let's say you land this attack. Now once your active frames start, you see the hit, your opponent goes into their stun state. Now on hit, moves tend to leave your opponent in a longer block stun state. Most moves will leave you plus, because when your move is finished recovering, your opponent is still in their block stun state, meaning they cannot press a button until they're finished with their block stun. So Chun's forward medium punch is +2 on hit, and this is pretty much how combos are made. Basically, depending on your plus frames, you could do another moves, and then that could string into a combo, and then your combo could lead to something bigger. So using this, we're going to use another example, standing medium punch. This is the regular medium punch. This move on hit is +6. So what does that mean? Your opponent still has a 6 frame gap where they're serving their block stun. And during this 6 frame gap, if you press a button on frame 1, you could fit another 6 frame startup move in there. If your move has a 6 frame startup, you serve 5 frames of your counter state, and then on the 6th frame, the first active frame, that's when your move comes out. Your opponent literally can't do anything because now you're creating combos. Now realistically, this 6 frame gap that you have doesn't have to be filled with a 6 frame startup move. If you could fit a 4 frame in there, you could do 4 frame. If you have a 5 frame move that can fit in there, you could do a 5 frame move, as long as it's within that 6 frame gap. Like I was saying in the video, we're gonna keep this one a little bit simple because we're more so talking about frames, not combos. If you're able to understand how you can work around your opponent's block stun state, if you understand the frame data for your moves, you can create things like block strings, combos, frame traps, create pressure strings, all those good things that you see a lot of players doing. Now, depending if the move is done on block or on hit, you have different block stun states. Now back to the standing medium punch. On a hit, your opponent will receive 20 frames of block stun, but on block, your opponent only receives 15 block stun frames. So this changes the data of the move from +6 on hit to +1 on block. Because it's still plus on block, you could try to press another button, and this would theoretically frame trap your opponent because they only have like a 2-3 frame gap. For example, if we do standing medium punch on block, and immediately after, on frame 1, do standing light punch, this will frame trap the opponent. Standing medium punch is +1 on block, meaning your opponent has 1 frame of block stun that they're still serving while you can input another move. Now with this, you could do standing light punch starting on that frame, and if your opponent tries to press a button, they only have 2 to 3 frames that they could actually get the move out. Now moves in this game, fastest moves you can do are 4 frame startup moves. Now because of this, your opponent will get trapped. They only have a 2-3 frame gap because your standing light punch is already coming out, so you'll hit them on their counter frame, basically leading you to be able to create another combo. You take their turn, you could do whatever you want. Now because this is creating a frame trap, this is not a true combo where your opponent cannot press anything. The counter to this frame trap of your opponent could be a super or invincible reversal. Your opponent could get that off and interrupt your momentum. But let's say you realize that your opponent's always pressing on their wake up or always trying to take their turn back by mashing buttons. You could easily frame trap them like this and win out rounds. Now the reason why supers work or reversals work, depending on what you do, is because they have invincibility frames. Now invincibility frames, they're pretty much exactly how they sound. You can't do anything, you can't press, you can't throw. If you do any of those two, you're immediately gonna get countered. All you could really do in this situation is block. So it's more of a mind game more than anything. So we talked about moves on hit, we talked about moves on block. Now what about if you whiff a move? Now for this example, we'll use heavy punch. So this move on hit is +2. This move on block is -3. So you can't really combo after this move because it's only +2. Like I mentioned earlier, our fastest move is 4 frames and it's too far away to even land to create a combo. And it also doesn't fit in the 2 frame gap that we have. Whiffing a move is if you press a button and it doesn't connect with your opponent at all. Your opponent doesn't go through any block stun. They receive 0 block stun while you're doing your move. So this is where that recovery state comes into play. This move in particular has 20 recovery frames. What does that mean? You can't save yourself, you can't do anything, you gotta serve out those 20 frames. I mean, in some instances, with some moves, you could do a reversal, but let's just say for now, you can't do anything in those 20 frames. You gotta serve it out, that's your penalty for whiffing the move. Now, if your opponent is fast enough to react to this, and they see that you whiff, they could do something called a whiff punish. Exactly what it sounds like. They could press a button, catch your move, and if they do catch that move, you'll get hit with a punish counter, and a punish counter does 20% more damage on whatever that move is that they landed. And that's why whiff punishing becomes very strong at a higher level. This is why you don't see that many high level players whiffing buttons that often unless they know that they can whiff them. And so that's pretty much how frame data works. Moves on hit, moves on block. You're able to read the frame meter now. Like I said, this was a very beginner friendly tutorial. Frame data goes a lot more in depth. You can create pressure strings, so many different things that you can do now that you know frame data. You know how to create combos basically, but we'll go a little bit more in depth with that in other videos. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, sub. Let me know what else you guys want to see, and I'll catch you guys in the other videos. Peace.